Noah, on 2K, they used to have this part of the game where it was the celebrities that you could actually play with, like from the celebrity game. And I always wanted to play in that celebrity game. I just always felt like, I could get out there and have a good time, kind of show out, get some rebounds, boards.
Maybe, yeah. It seems like there are a lot of different ways that people approach that. Some are super serious, and then some are just having the time of their lives. And
well, if it wasn't on TV, I would feel like they're recording it. You could look back at it again and again. Sometimes there are viral little social media moments that come from that, like when Monet Davis did the spin move on Kevin Hart. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I went down a rabbit hole and found some of Nick Kyrgios, the Australian tennis player, in an NBL celebrity game, and he caught some flack for being a little too serious, but
that fits the MO though. Does that fit the MO?
Yeah, he was competitive. He was blocking kids. I don't personally have any problems with that. Like, the ball tossed up.
Right. I feel you on that.
Try your best.
I caught some flack previously because I had blocked a kid shot in a PAL game. He like stole the ball from me in the backcourt, and then he tried to like get a layup. Get that out of here, kid! Like, come on, man. Hey, welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University, Wilmington Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Ben Berry in the cut. Good to be with you, Noah, as always. We're approaching training camp, and what are we, less than 2 weeks now? Or about 2 weeks, 10 days or so?
Indeed. The 27th is the date that is circled on the calendar. Yep.
All right, there we have it. And a lot of little details leaking out about the league. We got the in-season tournament to talk about, as well as these 2K ratings that are floating out there about all the NBA players, specifically the 76ers. But I think we haven't spent a lot of time this offseason talking about the Sixers Hall of Fame coach, Doc Rivers. And according to Caesar Sportsbook, he is plus 3,000. Noah, to win NBA Coach of the Year, which aren't great odds. But at the same time, we've talked about on this podcast the job that he did last season without Ben Simmons and, getting James Harden late in the year and leading this team to another successful regular season, a little unheralded, a little bit with Doc Rivers' idiosyncrasies and some of his nature, kind of pulls away maybe from some of the coaching acumen that he displayed, during the regular season, and some of the great play designs that he made in the playoffs as well, that namely the Embiid buzzer beater game winner against the Toronto Raptors was something he drew up. And do you think that suddenly Doc Rivers is a guy who's kind of under the radar, or a guy who's not getting his due with all that he's accomplished, and potentially with this incredible lineup that the Sixers have, going into next season?
I don't think I personally go that far. I think many would agree with the Hall of Fame, label you put out there, and understand that he's got a lot of wins under his belt, picked up number 1,000 with the Sixers a while back, and of course, has a lot on his resume. But you look at the top coaches in the league, and I think most people would share a lot of the same names there. Nick Nurse, Ty Lue, would be on that list, and
Spoelstra.
Yeah, Spoelstra, of course. I don't think Doc Rivers, for many people, would be in that tier of the top 4 or 5 guys. And I do think that's understandable, because so much of where coaches and players are tested is the postseason. And of course, Doc Rivers has well-known flaws and failures related to the playoffs. So I think with the Coach of the Year, perhaps the first year in Philadelphia, I would more be on the same page with you, where he should have gotten some more momentum for that particular award. led the team in his very first season to the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. Yes, the talent was great, but obviously the coach plays a big role in that regular season success. I think this time around, those odds plus 3,000, like, I understand them not being better for Doc Rivers, because I think number one, like a team with James Harden, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, everyone believes that they should win at least 50 regular season games. So it's not a case where he can be a surprising story, a la, Tom Thibodeau a couple years back, perhaps. And I think Doc Rivers, yes, like, has quite a few positive coaching qualities, but it's just a situation where, considering him elite, I don't think many folks do, and I completely understand that seemingly consensus view across the league.
And it's funny, I'm going to guess, like, at this stage of his career, he probably doesn't even care about those individual accolades, one bit. And it's funny, you talk about the perception across the league of, what the Sixers should be, what they might be, and where Doc Rivers fits in that Coach of the Year hierarchy. And it's funny, like, even with that perception out there, what he brings and offers players around the league seems to be very attractive. Like, guys are coming here because they have the opportunity to be coached by him, to join what the Sixers have going on here. And he's definitely, a part of that positive, momentum and the ideal that the Sixers are on the cusp of something great, and are at a level that, as far as free agent wise and attracting players and whatnot, and Daryl Morey has a lot to do with that, obviously, with the influx of former Rockets players. But with all that said, I would imagine that this, murmur of guys, wanting to come here around the league is a level they couldn't have reached with Brett Brown, a level that they couldn't have reached if maybe there was another, coach here. But it's funny because you got a guy like Ime Udoka who, takes the Celtics from cellar dwellers all the way to the finals, and he's lauded for that. But Doc Rivers, who can't get past the second round, is, take this team past the second round, hasn't, even gained any notoriety for any of the accomplishments that he's made, just carrying this team and trying to shepherd them to this next level. So it's kind of like, what have you done for me lately? Like, if you're not, in the winner's circle, then it's just not enough. And are the expectations too high for fan wise? I mean, so many of us are projecting toward the playoffs, even, overlooking the regular season. I know that's not your perspective, Noah, because you're very focused on the steps along the way. But where do you see, like, you mentioned, like, the big picture stuff, like, Doc Rivers doesn't quite, meet the level of having the notoriety to be in that Coach of the Year, upper echelon conversation, but is like a 67 win season, 65 win season. Is that the level he would have to reach to regain, some stature there?
I guess a lot of that would be based on, are there any other spectacular, shocking stories around the NBA?
Right.
Yeah, we probably should have mentioned Ime Udoka and Monty Williams as guys who have ascended to that top tier of coaches as
well. For some reason, they're so much more likable. I mean, from an outsider's perspective, just, knowing their stories, hearing things about them, where I don't feel like that's the same for Doc. But
I do think there are pros and cons to Doc Rivers' experiences. Like, for instance, with Monty Williams, because he doesn't have tons and tons of years as a head coach, there aren't that many instances of, spats with players that folks know about. And then you have, last postseason where he has a disastrous Game 7 and the relationship with DeAndre Ayton is under scrutiny, and things of that nature tend to become more publicized as you coach for a long time. But to the question of the Sixers' expectations, I think, as we've said, somewhere in the 50 to 52 win ballpark does feel really reasonable given the talent level here. And it's hard to win 60 plus games in a conference that is this good.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Bucks and the Celtics and the Heat, you have to play those teams, and it's very hard to sweep those season series. But yeah, if Doc Rivers were to pull that off and Tyrese Maxey were to ascend to an all-star level, and Rivers were to justifiably get a lot of credit for that development, and the Embiid Harden pairing were to display new levels, and Rivers was super innovative with how he used those guys and really savvy about how he employs the Sixers' newfound depth and all of these best case sort of scenarios, and Doc Rivers was clearly integral in that, then yeah, Doc Rivers Coach of the Year. That campaign would be legitimate, but the reason the odds are plus 3,000 is I think those things all happening does not look especially likely.
Yeah, maybe not the place you want to place your shekels and when it comes to who you're choosing for Coach of the Year, if you like those type of long bets. But
I like Ty Lue personally. I think if that team is healthy, he is a strong contender for that award. Just fundamentally very, very good coach. I think it was awfully impressive how well that roster played without superstar talent and with the boatload of injuries last year. And I could see the Clippers, especially with, a rejuvenated John Wall, potentially, having a nice season here and healthy for the first time in a while, being a big story, and Ty Lue winning the award. So I think I would lean toward him from the betting perspective, if I were to be placing something on this race.
That's a great decision. I feel like there's a little JB Bickerstaff type of momentum right now. For some reason, the Cavs just continue to fall into these opportunities and scenarios, and whatever you want to make of those mysterious, number one picks they got in consecutive seasons and all that. But they're not afraid to put themselves in a situation. And one of our other topics that we wanted to get to, I think this is an excellent segue, because I think that Darius Garland leap that he was able to make, and the leap specifically projected all the way to the All-Star appearance, I think that is like a prototype for a Tyrese Maxey, kind of undersized for an NBA guard, and just prolific when it comes to, scoring the basketball and, shooting the basketball and being more involved and whatnot. So I think the great thing about Darius Garland is he just had the ultimate green light where there was no one to defer to, where Tyrese Maxey has these veterans and Embiid and Harden, but still able to find his shine. But, transitioning away from the Coach of the Year stuff, how significant do you feel like Maxey's breakout, another, leap forward for Maxey, is going to impact this team? And could that leap forward project all the way to him being an all-star this year?
Yeah, I was kind of looking back at the all-star race last year, and it's interesting because I think just the format of the voting leads to some strangeness inevitably. There tend to be quite a few injury replacements these days because teams are understandably conservative about any of their stars nursing injuries. So last year you had LaMelo Ball, Jared Allen, DeJounte Murray, all as first-time All-Stars via injury replacement. And that's just Adam Silver's decision. So, if Tyrese Maxey is not among the starters or the reserves, and Adam Silver agrees with the view that he's having a all-star worthy season, then Tyrese Maxey's an all-star. But I do think it seems rather realistic that it could happen this year, and Garland's not a bad template. Obviously, they're not identical players. Garland's a superior passer and headed into the NBA with more heralded shooting talent, and the team structure is different, as you noted. But it does feel possible. Speaking of all-star game format weirdness, DeMar DeRozan was a starting guard last year. So not every folk in, the NBA would agree with that classification, but it's a little challenge where if DeRozan
He's
again,
playing in a gigantic market in Chicago, so
yeah, and he's got the reputation as an all-star level player, understandably, and is considered a guard, even though kind of is not really a guard. He's more of a forward. So I do think it's possible for Maxey. And then a lot of it's just like, is he appearing more and more on head coaches' scouting reports? Because those are the guys who choose the reserves if Maxey is not a starter. I do remember back to late last season, I believe, before the Sixers' last meeting with the Bucks, Mike Budenholzer, given Maxey some praise, and just kind of you sensed over the course of the year that more of these coaches were recognizing, oh yeah, this is not a two-star team. Like, and Tyrese Maxey is not just the beneficiary of double teams anymore. He's creating his own shots extremely efficiently and dangerously, and we've got to look out for him. I think if he can continue improving in that regard, and then also on these opposing coaches' scouting reports, it's less, oh, we can pick on Maxey defensively, and more, this is a pretty sturdy player on defense, and I'm not so sure we're going to have a ton of success targeting him or scoring against him. Then I think that bolsters his case a little further among the East head coaches. But it's always, I think, tough to predict and strange. And honestly, like, I think there's a really good chance it does happen in one way or the other. Maybe it's the coaches like him because of some of the reasons I just outlined. Maybe he doesn't make that initial cut, and there are 2, 3, 4 injuries, and he's averaging over 20 points per game on a high seed in the Eastern Conference. And Adam Silver says, yeah, that's an all-star level player. So I could see one of those scenarios happening here for Tyrese Maxey. And as we've discussed a ton, he's just not a guy that it's easy to bet against these days. I do think there's just so many valid reasons to feel that he's going to continue moving in a positive direction.
On the flip side, when I think about it, and like you said, the All-Star game is so subjective, and it's hit or miss with what guys make it with so many snubs, each year. But is it even necessary for him to be an all-star for this team to reach that next level? Of course not. He can obviously just maintain and improve even the slightest bit over last season, and that would just be gigantic, for this team. And also, there's a lot of other, cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So his opportunities might be even less than they were last season, depending on how the rotations work or what have you. I mean, you bringing in a guy like PJ Tucker, who doesn't need the ball, is phenomenal for this team because he can do some of those other things that they need and be a really glue type of person for the roster and not, demand the basketball. Less so for DeAnthony Melton, who will need some shots. But you think about, Montrezl Harrell getting his off the offensive glass or, in transition and things like that. So I feel like there's a path for Tyrese Maxey to be an all-star, but is it even necessary for them to be, what the Sixers need to be? Because I feel like it's more or less Harden that needs to take the step forward and, clean up some of his, efficiency issues and, shooting issues, from the 3-point line as far as, being efficient below the, 3-point line as well. And I feel like if Maxey can, continue to be the complement, it's not even necessary for him to reach this next all-star level, this particular season. Maybe when, Harden starts to fade a little bit, possibly the season after next, there will be more opportunity for Maxey to kind of do his thing, but it's not even necessary for him to be an all-star necessarily for this team to take the next step forward. I think it would be a great feather in his cap for all the work that he's put in and the, stuff he's endured to get to this point. But I'm more or less focused on him, maintaining what he was able to achieve last year, which for a lot of players is difficult, particularly considering that, this is a team that continues to have a very high level of expectation. So hopefully he can continue to meet that. There's no reason to think that he won't, but I'm just more focused on him continuing to grow and maybe not having to take get the notoriety that comes with being an all-star or continue to turn heads. Just, I think he's a player that also be satisfied and should be with, his peers and the coaches continuing to be really pleased and excited about what he brings to the table.
Yeah, speaking of the peers, it was interesting. He was only 18th among East guards in player voting this year. So I think it's safe to assume that he will rise considerably in that particular category. But I hear
although there are a new influx of East guards with DeJounte, CJ McCollum, as well as Donovan Mitchell. So there's more names to be in the mix and to compete with.
Sure thing. Yeah. It's definitely not essential that he becomes an all-star. I agree with you there. I think the Sixers, though, expect their backcourt to be exceptionally great. Yeah. So whatever that looks like, that probably does need to happen, because I think as things stand,
just a natural progression type of thing.
Yeah, the wing, especially offensively, is not a position of strength for this team. And I think they expect their backcourt to be great, and that's fair enough. And a lot of that will ride on James Harden being healthy and playing well and being comfortable with his teammates and all these things we've talked a bunch about. But I do think Tyrese Maxey is capable of making the leap this year. I think probably improvements for him, might not look like getting a million times better in every area. And there might be certain parts of his game that are difficult to maintain. It just shooting 43% from 3-point range. I don't care how great a shooter you are. Tough to do that year after year. But I do think drawing more free throws, becoming more comfortable, like playing through and drawing contact, I expect him to get significantly better there, and I do think that will have a big impact with his game overall. I think his passing and comfort, just making plays out of the pick and roll, with more reps, he's going to, I think, become a little more advanced in that area of the game. And then I think defensively, he expects more of himself, and I think he can be better as a defender. And I think the Sixers, quite honestly, will require that from him. So that is certainly an important part of his game to watch this season.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilmU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
One of the things we talked about on the last podcast with Amy, Noah, and I'm curious where you are with it, is with the introduction of Montrezl Harrell, there's a lot of new names and faces, and a few we've mentioned with PJ Tucker, DeAnthony, and Daniel House, of course. I'm curious where you are with the guys who fans are more familiar with in Sixers uniforms, like Shake and Furkan, Matisse, George Niang, guys that are seemingly getting pushed further down the bench. Do you feel like, suddenly with these new names that are coming in, that is shaping up more or less that some of these guys might be traded or just will be, sit in the pine? Of course, there is competition that is involved in all this. We don't know how Matisse might show up if suddenly he's got a dead-eye three-point shot or just an improved three-point shot. Let me be more realistic. But where are you at with the way the roster is shaking out, particularly with this influx of free agents who all are getting guaranteed money and seemingly opportunities, particularly because of Doc Rivers' experience with a lot of these guys and Tucker and Harrell? Where are you at with where the roster is shaking out and how some of these guys are getting pushed further down the bench?
I think I Yeah, I see the path to consistent minutes as more difficult for Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz. I think back to the Heat series where I was surprised how candid Rivers was about feeling the Heat had superior depth and admitting, I think it was before game 3 of that series, that he still didn't feel that any of the Milton, Korkmaz, Thibault trio had earned a consistent role. So I don't think that bodes well for them being well positioned to do so, heading into training camp next year.
Right. Paul Reed, after the game, talking about how he felt like he had garnered more, trust from Doc Rivers than they bring in guys, right over top of him to add to the roster.
Right. Yeah, I think, right, we know Paul Reed and Doc Rivers took some time to build trust there. And yeah, I think so. Just the 25-year-old-ish guys, I guess they're all 25 actually. It is tough, and I think they've got to stand out. And for Shake Milton in particular, just like avoid these unfortunate injuries that have popped up for him. Stay healthy, continue to prove that you're a consistent, viable NBA two-way player. And yeah, I think he can get some consistent minutes for this team. I think that's tougher for me to see with Furkan Korkmaz unless he really rediscovers that shooting stroke and is, knocking down 45% from three and is the hot hand who maybe does get minutes over Daniel House, who is running cold, in that sort of scenario. Sure, you go with the guy who's on fire from 3-point range. Yeah, with Paul Reed, it's tough because Montrezl Harrell, though he is a flawed defender, most definitely, and is a small center, is a former Sixth Man of the Year winner, and is just a downright excellent scorer off the bench. Not only does he do it at a high volume relative to his minutes, but he's super efficient and is just really, really good at scoring in the paint. And Paul Reed does not have as much of a track record of being reliable. So, yeah, I think Doc Rivers won't want to have the perception that he's playing favorites, but he knows what Montrezl Harrell does well, and he doesn't have as much experience with Paul Reed giving him good minutes. So I think, of course, there's the concern that he might lean too heavily on Harrell, that he might prefer Harrell and not give Reed chances. We'll have to see how it plays out, but to have that in your mind, to me, is fair enough at this stage.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of layers to what's going to happen here as these guys head to Charleston. And we'll figure it all out as much as possible along the way. Of course, Media Day is coming up September 26th, and then quickly October 3rd is their first preseason game against the Brooklyn Nets with or without Ben Simmons. So things are going to get hot and heavy quickly here. Make sure you're following Noah Levick on all of his social media platforms, as well as checking out his work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com to get the very latest and to stay up to date. Staying up to date, Noah, requires us to talk a little video games. Are you into the video games at all, sir?
So back in the day, I definitely was. I have some fond memories. I think makes me sound kind of old saying this. Actually, like 2K1, I want to say, was the first game I remember playing and enjoying. Okay. And I remember, I think
you going franchise mode on that. You going all the way?
No, I like some of the historic, playing with the ABA players. Awesome. I always thought that was really cool. Yeah. And then I think like 2K2, 2K3, I remember enjoying Michael Jordan with the Wizards, getting to have that experience. Something about that was appealing to me. And then here and there, of course, at a friend's house or whatever, and they have 2K, right. I'll give it a shot. But I'm far from a gaming whiz, admittedly. Check out a little Chris move here and there, right. Well-known YouTuber. But I'm not an expert on the game or the ratings, but I know it as gotten a lot more sophisticated since the 2K1 days, and that the ratings always inspire much debate among fans.
I am not a gamer either. I definitely have some gaming in my background. I am probably a little more in tune slightly because my son is heavily into it. So we had to scope out the PS5. We had to, he just bought 2K23 and Madden with his summer money that he earned from working. So he's definitely engrossed in it, and he has called me to play a couple of times, and we haven't gotten around to it. We have played Madden, but not 2K23. But as much as you and I can kind of, pick and choose when we play or what we do, NBA players are really heavily invested into their ratings, as we know, into playing the game on the road. And that was a big, part of the bubble is guys, playing, video games and passing the time. For the Sixers, and fans pay attention to this too, the ratings for their team. And Embiid is the highest rated player on the team with a 96, which is completely understandable. 3 points shy of the best rating, which would be a 99. So he's highly regarded in the 2K video gaming world. James Harden just shy of the 90-point mark at 89, and he's the second highest rated player on the team, which is also understandable. And then the rest of the guys fall in place after that. So I don't really see much controversy when it comes to where the Sixers fall. I mean, Embiid, he's not a 97, where I don't really see how people can be upset about, where he stands. I think the thing for me is, when you play with the Sixers, do you get the feeling that they're a team that can compete with the other, squads out there? And I would assume that they're a pretty popular team. They have to be with, Harden and Embiid. Maxey is a nice foil. Maybe, like you mentioned earlier, the Clippers, like maybe they're not a team like the Clippers who people were like, oh, well, you can't play with them because you remember those teams where it's like they have too many stars, just too stacked type of thing. But I don't have a problem with the ratings. It seemed pretty
solid to me. Yeah, I guess Maxey, I'm sure folks have opinions about him. He's in 85. I also don't have any issue with that rating. Maybe some folks would feel that 89 is too high for Harden, just given the way his last season finished. But to me, it seems reasonable enough. It will be interesting to see if Embiid does ever ascend to that 98, 99 level. 96 is pretty darn good, though. So
I love that they adjust the ratings during the season. I think that's the thing that I enjoyed the most. Guys going through a cold spell, all of a sudden we got to knock him down a few pegs. But, you go on a crazy run, all of a sudden, your rating goes up a few. So I like that part of it. I think, I would like to get back into gaming. I do have, some, action RPGs and things like that I like to play. But when I actually sit down and play, I feel like I should be doing something else. And maybe that's like something internal I need to figure out. But I feel like I could be spending my time better doing something else.
You. Yeah, I stuck with it for a little bit, enjoying like the franchise mode stuff. I feel like that's one where you can get immersed in the world.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, yeah.
Kind of randomly playing or whatever, but nothing against folks who are into gaming, but it's also not as much my cup of tea as I know it is for some others. It is interesting here to see the Sixers have a bunch of guys who are like 85 3-point rating, including PJ Tucker. George Niang is an 84. I would argue that's a little bit low if we're looking for some controversy. I think George Niang, just pure shooting, like there aren't many people better in the NBA than him. So, if you're looking for a reason to be angry at the NBA 2K folks for something Sixers related, maybe that is one of them. I'm sure Paul Reed will enjoy if he can make an in-season climb. He's a 73 right now. I recall back in the day, Hassan Whiteside was miffed that his rating was too low, and took a lot of pride in raising his rating. I could see Paul Reed being a similar guy where he's keeping an eye on that throughout the season and wants to climb into the high 70s or what have you. But I think by and large, with like the main stars, the 2K folks seem to do a decent job. I think some of the details probably fall by the wayside here and there, but it is a difficult task to rate hundreds and hundreds of players in all these different categories. So I'm sympathetic toward it being a tough job. Ben Barry notes for us that Ben Simmons is an 83 for those who are curious. So Tyrese Maxey higher than Ben Simmons for the time being, which is, notable, I guess.
I can see his rating rising if he can actually play basketball again, because we haven't even seen the dude on the court. So how can you even give him a rating even based off of his performance? I think that you mentioned George Niang just projecting back to the actual roster, and you mentioned the shooting. Like, that's even more the reason why I would think Furkan has less of a role, because Niang can actually do the thing that you expect of him on a consistent basis, whereas Furkan just never can quite capture that consistency from the 3-point line, and particularly from the free throw line, where you're supposed to be a great shooter but don't shoot a great free throw percentage, where Niang, I think, actually can be a specialist more effectively than Furkan can.
I do think I agree with that, although it's contingent on his health. And we saw playing on a knee that was way, way under 100%. He made a stoic attempt to do that during the postseason, but the shooting percentages were abysmal, and that hurt the Sixers because one of the guys they were counting on for three-point shooting was not doing that at the level he did during the regular season. But yeah, I do think Niang has a standout NBA skill and just has developed this nuanced understanding of all the little complementary pieces to his game that are necessary to stay on the court. Now, when the playoffs roll around, I think the vision of him as a guy you can give 15 to 20 minutes a game is more difficult to buy. But if he's healthy and he's doing his thing, shooting a bunch of catch and shoot threes and nailing over 40% of them, then yeah, I think you'll like having George Niang on your team as an option. But every single night, him, being on the floor, that does look less likely now because the Sixers have upgraded their depth and perhaps don't need him as much as they did last year. Speaking of, things they needed that they will not this season, Furkan Korkmaz as a backup point guard, I do not think anybody's expect that to, regularly be at play. I think
Danny Green won't be ringing the rock up.
No. Danny Green showed some flashes of the UNC on-ball talent back in the 7-man game against the Nuggets. So he does have that in his bag. But yeah, the Sixers are a little better with the backup ball handler situation.
Has he caught on anywhere? Is Danny Green?
Well,
I guess he's rehabbing. He's rehabbing, right?
Yeah, I mean he was traded to the Memphis Grizzlies, so he's on that roster, and maybe he'll be healthy for their postseason. I know he would love for that to be the case.
How quickly we forget. I apologize to all the Danny Green lovers out there, but Noah Levick is the man. He is the Joel Embiid to my James Harden. Ben Barry, we'll call him Doc Rivers. And we appreciate you listening to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University, WilmU Works. Everyone, we are closing in on training camp. It's about to get real. We will see you next time. Keep it locked here for all the latest on the Sixers.